Japan Up Close.
So President Biden is definitely an American president who really values the bilateral relationship between the United States and Japan, and this will continue despite the results of the midterm elections. Midterms, most of us were bracing for a tremendous defeat for the Democrats, but this did not happen. Most likely, much to the relief of President Biden and his cohorts. But regardless, I mean, they still have control, of the Senate, and it's the Senate that deals with foreign relations. So I think the impact upon bilateral relations between the two countries is very minimal. IPEF is starting to move about. Hopefully, there'll be more meat to what this IPEF actually intends to be. Quad is still around. Well, one of the key questions is, and I think IPEF is sort of like a compromise. The United States should have been part of TPP, and there's no inclination that President Biden plans to return to this framework, and that's really unfortunate because I think there's lots of value in the United States being part of this free trade, this high quality free trade network. But of course, we don't see this. And the reason why we don't see this is, in many ways, President Biden is more of an American first president than President Trump. Now, President Trump's policy has actually promoted American firms to ship their production abroad because of the tax laws that he implemented. President Biden has changed this drastically. And of course, you have the CHIPS Act. And I guess for many EU countries, especially Germany and France, the Inflation Reduction Act smacks protectionism. It's giving subsidies to the American electric car industry. So things like this. It's that if we're going to work together as a team, that we are nations that share values, then I think there has to be more of let's work together and less of let's go it alone. It's just America. So this is something that I really would like to see in the second half of President Biden's term. And of course, even though we say second half, the final year, most likely the election will take up a huge portion of the president's attention. So I think what's really key is what happens within the coming year. And another area in which U.S. and Japan will most likely strengthen their cooperation is in the realm of security. And the security is, of course, traditional security. It means the Japanese self-defense forces working closely with the United States military. It also means the so-called Chip 4, which is bringing together Korea, Taiwan, Japan, and the United States to share their technologies in producing state-of-the-art semiconductors. And I'd like to see more progress in that category, and I'm sure we will. So there's lots to look forward to, and I think the relationship is very, very stable. And there's only one trajectory in which this relationship could go, and that is up. So I think we're in good shape. Now, I think Quad, when it was initially developed, China was the key nation on the minds of the four parties. Quad has evolved, but I do not necessarily think that this evolution is a positive thing because Quad now deals with environmental issues, vaccine allotments. I mean, so what is Quad? I mean, initially, I think Quad was about more of a security framework, but that's really been watered down. And that's one of the reasons why nobody really talks about Quad anymore. And I think it's really a good example of same bed, different dreams. I think the United States, Australia has one view of Quad. Then there's Japan's view, which coincides with, of course, the free and open Indo-Pacific FOIP. In Japan, it's FOIP. In Australia and the United States, it's FOIPs. What's lacking is the S at the end, and S, of course, is S for strategy. So in Japan, it's a concept or a vision, where for the United States and Australia, it's a strategy. Now, a strategy is aimed at somebody, and we all know where the strategy is aimed at. And I think Japan, being a very, very important trade partner of China, I mean, it's the largest trading partner for Japan, is a little bit wary of antagonizing its neighbor. So that's, of course, very understandable. But again, are these four parties on the same page? And that, I think, I'm not so sure. And then we have India, which India, of course, sees China as a potential threat, and therefore was very eager to join Quad initially. But the situation in Ukraine has really shown that India, to a large degree, is about India. So, and when I speak with Indian scholars, their mentality is we're pursuing our national interests. What's wrong with that? Or it would be Russia is our friend. What's wrong with dealing with our friends? So, for countries like the United States and Australia and Japan, Russia is not necessarily a country in which it shares values. And this is a nation that has invaded a neighboring country. So, are we really on the same wavelength? Therefore, I think Quad will have problems in the future once it starts to deal with these real hard issues such as security. What do I propose instead? I mean, of course, leave Quad as it is. It's important to have India at least partially in our corner, but I propose what I call an inner Quad. Now, having a relationship, well, first of all, a relationship with the United States is fundamental. It's key. And there is no way for Japan to pursue its security interests without the United States. Australia is also key, but you have to keep in mind that Australia is a distant nation, and it's also a small nation. I mean, relatively speaking, compared to Japan. Japan is therefore reaching out to countries like Britain and establishing a security relationship there. But again, Britain is far away. And so we have to look closer. So which nations are key? I'd like to mention, well, first of all, it would be Korea, and the other would be Taiwan. And so include the United States in this. This is my vision of an inner Quad. And this is where, the geostrategic interests really overlap. These countries really, if they work proactively, can really help each other out. Now, in Korea, relations with Korea has always been difficult for Japan. But now, we need to realize in this post-COVID world, the situation is changing very rapidly. If Japan and Korea bicker over all hosts of issues, mostly relating to the past, this only benefits China. So I think it's time to really sort out the differences here and have a positive mindset in working together. Now, Taiwan is another sticky issue. But, again, Japan is afraid of antagonizing China. And therefore, a good example is, Japanese diplomats or uniformed officers do not meet Taiwanese officials in public. They do not go to the representative office. Other countries do. They have no qualms about this. Japan, the United States allows Taiwanese officers to study in its academy as long as they don't wear uniforms. Japan doesn't even do that. So even though the big, really popular phrase now that's been thrown around is a conflict in Taiwan is Japan's conflict, it seems to be more just saying things than actually looking at what Japan can do. So if these four countries come together, that's really a formidable force. And I also like to mention that Philippines. Japan is doing a lot more with the Philippines, but they also comprise the first island chain, and therefore it's a very important partner. So I think having friends beyond the distant, these nations, like-minded nations, that's important. But what is critical for Japan to work on are the nations that actually are much, much closer. Well, unfortunately, after I wrote that Japan is acting like the third largest economy, because of the weak yen, it seems that Japan may actually become number four. And how long it will remain at number four, that remains to be seen. It really depends on Japanese economic policy in the future. That being said, I think Japan, well, first of all, it was under Abe's leadership that Japan became very, very visible. In the past, there were periods in which Japanese prime ministers would change annually. I mean, what kind of visibility, what kind of impact do you have when your top leader changes on a yearly basis? You know, you convene at the G7, you say hello, nice to meet you, and the other leaders are thinking, oh, we're not going to see this guy next year. So the fact that this has changed, I think, is a very positive thing for Japan. And so, but after Abe-san, we had Suga-san and then Kishida-san. So what's important for Kishida-san is some sort of staying power, and the fact that other leaders can depend on Japan, that he will be at the helm more than a year. So, and that's something that's very important. Japan is hosting G7, again, something which will increase Japan's visibility. Just today, December 16th, the government released the three defense papers, and that is the National Security Strategy, National Defense Program Guideline, and also the Medium-Term Defense Program. And then this is important, and Japan is really, really changing. And also, Japan is increasing its defense budget, and this is a very large increase. It should have been done a long time ago, but I guess they, as they say, better late than never. So, but now the big question is how do you finance this? And this is where things get a little bit tricky, because the Japanese economy is not growing at an enormous rate. Real wages have not really increased over the past 30 years. So logic would dictate that it's not a great time to raise taxes. And that includes corporate taxes as well. But it seems like because Japan's economic pie is not growing any larger, that this is the only way to do it. And in this case, I think what's really important is that you have to inform the public why this is necessary. And, I've been teaching Japan for a very long time. In Japan, national security issues is really in the background. I mean, you don't learn it in junior high, you don't learn it in high school, college, the theoretical aspects, yes. But do you really do it, including hardcore military issues? No. So most Japanese take peace as a given, that it will always be there. It's almost like, I usually refer to it as like air, because we don't appreciate air because it's always there and it's cost-free. Japan, I think, or many Japanese perceive security to be similar to air. And so if air is prevalent and it's free, then why do we need to pay higher taxes? And so this is where there has to be more dialogue with the public, and also more, I think there needs to be more effort in changing the mindset of the Japanese. And the best way to do this is to re-examine what is taught in schools. And this is going to be very difficult. And then but to have the next generation Japanese who will bear the brunt of this increased expenditures, that national security is a very, very important matter. So this is where I think that if Japan is to remain relevant, it needs to have its people on board, and there can be more effort in this area for sure. So 2023 will definitely mark the beginning of the post-COVID world. Of course, it's not going to be a clean-cut post. We'll still have to live with the coronavirus, but we are returning to normalcy. And so, in many ways, this is the first uh, normalcy summit, for lack of a better term. This means Japan can play a very important role in sort of defining the future direction that the G7 countries will head. So it's a common goal, a common destiny. And so what will be the main topics? Well, of course, Ukraine will have to be discussed. And this will include sanctions against Russia. From Japan's perspective, I personally believe Japan could do a lot more in supporting Ukraine. Uh, Ukraine may seem as a distant nation, but what is the outcome if the Russians are successful in changing the status quo through force? What kind of world we'll be living in? So it affects us. And I think Japan, in order to preserve the importance of the rule of law, democracy, the rights that we believe in, then yes, Japan should definitely do more. The other issue is the sanction part against Russia. For example, right now in Japan, used cars are very expensive. One of the reasons why is because a lot of these used cars are sent to Russia. And you wonder, why are we sending used cars to Russia? And it's because the sanctions right now say that the cars below 60,000 US dollars, give or take, can be exported. Now, I don't know that many used cars that cost more than 60,000. So that means pretty much 99% of the cars can be exported to Russia. And so what are we doing here? I think it's important that ordinary Russians feel the pain of the war. And we're certainly not helping in that category by allowing these exports of used cars. So this, I think, will be the crucial issue to discuss by the G7 leaders. In the environment, we cannot overlook this. Again, we are all impacted by these drastic environmental changes. So this will be discussed along with the global economy. I'm not an economist, but my friends who are saying that we are most likely headed towards a recession. And this is not good. We do not really need a recession right now. So again, it's important that these G7 countries work together, not just pursue their own individual interests, but sort of, I think it's Benjamin Franklin here is that it comes to mind, enlightened self-interest, I'm going to help you. By helping you, I become better. That kind of mentality, I think, is very, very important. And of course, China will be discussed. I was just in a conference in Manila. The Chinese are very active in the South China Sea. Will this continue? Yes, it will probably increase. So what are we going to do? And of course, fortunately, countries like Britain, France, and Germany see this area, part of the world, as being very important. And that's why they're sending their warships out. And therefore, there's lots of common ground in which the world leaders or the G7 leaders can come together and discuss what are we going to do with China. And then the venue being Hiroshima, of course, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons will probably be a topic. It's hard to see if there will be any conclusive results in this category, just because there's a major war being fought in Europe. But nevertheless, it's an important issue, and we should never give up hope for a nuclear-free world. So I think this is, Prime Minister Kishida being from Hiroshima, perhaps this is a very personal issue. Now, when we talk about G7, we tend to focus just on Hiroshima, but there are 14 other related meetings by my count. And these all, deal with a host of really important issues. So I'm hoping that each of these meetings will bring together positive results that can be implemented. And now is the moment that the G7 countries really need to work together because it seems to be that Pax Americana is no longer as strong as it once was. So, and this is really an opportunity for Japan to really shine light as to the direction that we need to head towards too.
Japan up close.